And looking overseas, how is the CCP weaponizing a UN resolution to isolate Taiwan? And what would the consequences be for America and its allies? We're happy to have on Karla Jones, Senior Director with the American Legislative Exchange Council, to discuss what the U.S. can do to counter Beijing's influence. Karla Jones, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So first, tell us more about how the Chinese Communist Party has been weaponizing this particular UN resolution to isolate Taiwan, and what consequences does it have not only on Taiwan itself, but also on other countries, including the U.S.?
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's important to describe what UN General Assembly Resolution 2758 is. It was adopted in October of 1971, and it basically transferred representation in the UN from Chiang Kai-shek's government to the People's Republic of China government. And that's all it did. It did not talk about the One China principle. It did not talk about cross-strait relations. It did not talk about Taiwan as a sovereign country. It simply transferred that. And the ramifications, the real world ramifications, are that it has kept Taiwan out of UN organizations like the International Civil Aviation Organization, the WHO, Interpol, where Taiwan could make a meaningful contribution. So those are the real world immediate consequences. But the other thing that they've done in terms of making the UNGA 2758, equating it with the One China principle, is it's part of a greater strategy to delegitimize Taiwan as a sovereign entity. As a sovereign, let's just call it what it is. Taiwan is a country. And so they've used it to basically coerce other countries and lure other countries from switching diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. It figures into how the IOC has dealt with Taiwan, most recently at the Paris Olympics, where Taiwanese gold medalists weren't allowed to hear their own national anthem. And it's just part of a greater strategy to delegitimize Taiwan as a government. And once you delegitimize a country, it's a lot easier for that country to be subsumed by a larger country. Like, it's kind of like, I hate to liken things to the Holocaust, but it's what happened to the Jews in advance of the Holocaust, where they were delegitimized as a people. And it's more or less what the Hutus did to the Tutsis in Rwanda, where they delegitimized them as a people.
Well, certainly some very concerning efforts by the CCP here. And speaking more broadly about the CCP's growing pressure on international organizations like the UN, what can the United States government do to counter Beijing's influence?
Well, the first thing we need to do is adopt a resolution. Other countries have. We did have Senate resolution, I think it was 687, but it died in committee. Other countries like the UK, like most recently the Czech Republic, like the EU Parliament, like the Canadian Parliament, have adopted resolutions similar to what ALEC adopted just this month, opposing the PRC's misuse of UN General Assembly Resolution 2758.
And we know that according to Reuters, Trump's transition team is preparing for the U.S. to withdraw from the World Health Organization on the first day of his second term. So on the same topic here, how might this decision potentially impact China, and could it allow the CCP's influence to potentially fill the void?
I personally think that U.S. withdrawal from the WHO is a mistake. God knows it's an imperfect organization. God knows that the UN is sorely in need of reform. However, by withdrawing, we lose any leadership we can have in that organization, and we more or less cede this space to the PRC. And that could have negative ramifications for Taiwan.
And speaking of Taiwan's defense, we know that aside from diplomatic pressure, China in recent years has been stepping up its military threats against Taiwan, including, for example, the large massive naval forces just this month and daily military activities close to the island. And now President-elect Trump has said that Taiwan should pay more for U.S. defense. What's your reading on the incoming administration's Taiwan policy, and how should Taiwan potentially cope with it?
Well, first of all, it probably would be a good idea for Taiwan to ensure that its own military is as robust as it possibly can be. What I'm hoping is that the more incoming President Trump looks at Taiwan and how it has modernized its military, how it is buying more arms, that he will revisit statements like that. I'm also concerned about similar statements he's made with respect to our allies and partners in NATO. I think the United States needs to lead, and when we have criticism of our allies and partners, that criticism should be said behind closed doors rather than in public spaces. I think that tends to work better.
Well, all great insights and a lot to watch for sure when the new administration takes office in just a few weeks. Karla Jones, thank you so much for joining us.